This is part of a series of shows brought to you by Q Community College for the spring 2021 semester here. This is shown on Spectrum, Verizon, Firehouse, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, that is run through the APT, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in our studio, as we do always on the cusp of his State of the City speech, Auburn City Manager Jeff DYGERT, who has been City Manager since the fall of 2016. We've asked him to join us to give us a city update. We'll be talking about a lot of things that are going on at City Hall right now, this year's budget process for a budget that has to be adopted by July 1st, plans to reassess city properties, a deal to resolve the holdups on developing the Callett property on Upper State Street, and of course we'll talk a little bit about baseball, one of the manager's favorite subjects, with the return of an incarnation of the Auburn Double Days this summer. So welcome back to Inside Government. Delighted to have you here. So how are you and your family? It's been a couple months. I think we had you here last in the fall. How are you and your family dealing with COVID?
That's same as everybody else. I think we're sick of each other a little bit right at the moment, right? And everybody's
well, you have a teenager, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Have you been vaccinated?
I have.
And how about city departments and personnel?
We don't keep a definite list of that. We don't know name by name, but we've got a good sense that we've got a really good vaccination rate right now for our city workers. There was a lot of interest in it, and
you can't mandate it. It would have to be mandated likely by the federal government or the state government.
Correct. We could incentivize it, but for most folks, if they wanted to get it, we've arranged for them to have it.
And I know in some cases you had departments and department heads helping with the vaccinations down. You borrowed people from some departments and brought them down to BOCES to help with inoculations and that early on.
Yeah, I'm really happy to say that we have not forced anybody to take on those extra different duties, but we've had a tremendous amount of support from our employees at all levels and throughout all departments. We've had folks from our Public Works Department working vaccination clinics, as well as administrative staff and
firefighters.
And everybody
They've been giving them out on a regular basis as well.
Right, so we've been providing some administrative support to the extent that we can, and definitely providing quite a bit of vaccination support through the fire department.
So at this stage, we're a year, unfortunately, into this. What's been the biggest challenge for you as the city manager when it's come to COVID?
Communication. Communication's been I think, our biggest hurdle. And when I say that, I mean not necessarily even within our own organization, but the communication from the federal level on down, from the state level on down.
So up the chain versus...
Yeah, it makes it really difficult.
Because I think
right?
I just received an email from the city. I'm on some list. You know, you're doing, the number has, the age has been reduced to 50, and
yeah.
The city's been doing a good job getting that information out.
So what we did early on is we established a phone line with the intent to help folks that were either didn't have access to the internet or just weren't good at navigating the online portals and things like that. So we set that up very early on, hoping to really focus in on the elderly population that may have some barriers there. But what we found is we partnered with the hospital to help them get people into their clinics. We partnered with Cuyahoga County Health Department to do the same thing. Then we ended up partnering with East Hill Family Medical. And again, the whole thing about communication and cooperation is from New York State, each one of those entities had different rules they had to play by.
Are you worried now that the governor, I'm not talking about the politics of it, forget that aside. Obviously the legislature may or may not, depends on which member of the legislature you ask, has taken away some powers for the governor, and some of them, Lamondes will be here next week and he'll give us one view. Are you worried that now you're going to have 62 different views of how you're going to, where it used to be centralized with the governor making those decisions, now it's decentralized? Is that a bigger worry?
It may slow down the process, and of course you know my emergency services background, and in a time of an absolute crisis or emergency, you can't have all that bureaucracy, right?
You think we're over that hump?
I understand that. I think we're beyond that now. I think we're in, I guess what you would call, we would typically call the recovery stage. So there's more time to contemplate policy and things like that.
So let's talk about something positive on the COVID front. You're going to get some money
Okay,
from
okay.
the legislation signed by the president, I think 3 weeks ago now.
Right.
Does the city have any idea how much you're going to get from Washington?
We have been told that we'll get just north of $22 million.
And what will that go for?
We are still awaiting official guidance, right? So there's been some verbal claims made by various folks at the federal level. There's a lot of discussion going around. Different media outlets have put different information out there. What we know we can do, what we're fairly confident we can do, is we can reimburse ourselves for revenues lost due to COVID, expenses that were attributable to COVID. We want to be careful about those things because we can already recoup some of those costs through FEMA. So we want to
And you
make
want to
sure
also
that,
make sure you're well documented.
correct, right. So we've done that from the very beginning. Right at the moment, it looks like there is a focus on broadband, water, and sewer, oddly enough.
So these are one-time funds, as you understand it right now.
Correct.
Do you have a timeline where you must spend them by? Because I know that
So
was,
the total thing, right, so as you mentioned, approximately 2 or 3 weeks ago, the announcement was made, or the legislation was passed. Within 60 days of that passage of that, we're supposed to receive those funds to us. A year from that date, we'll receive the other half. We'll get half of them
okay.
within the next
Because I
45
know
days.
Neil
roughly.
O'Brien was sitting in that seat, the superintendent of Port Barn, on Thursday, and he said, we're still waiting for guidance. Is it for this year, is it for next year? And they
Right.
were waiting.
So
now.
ultimately, what we have seen is that the funds will need to be expended by December 31st of 2024.
So take out those expenses that you've incurred already and those not covered by FEMA. Do you see these as being one-time funds that you will do towards projects that don't have a recurring expense? So let me give you an example. One of your predecessors, Bruce Clifford, who was city manager, I think for a part of the time when you were in the department, but for a long time before that, in his 24 years, when he received federal funds like that were one time, he put them to capital. He didn't necessarily put them to staff. Is that what you see, as these are things that you won't have a reoccurring cost to?
Right. More than likely, there's going to go to, capital expenditures, either things that are planned, potentially to pay for things that are already in the process. We've got to look at all that. We have to really analyze our current budget situation, cash flow, and see what the parameters around these funds are going to be.
You know, if you could put your stoplights on broadband, you might be able to get them timed. No comment, manager?
No, it's always just one of those.
It's never going to please me.
One of those things that never seems like there's going to be a good solution to that.
So let me shift from that. We'll come back to the budget at the end because you have a budget that's due on July 1st. You'll be rolling that out.
Yep.
A couple of projects you've been working on, CALETS. So last week you were on the Wednesday morning roundtable, you and your staff.
Yep.
You talked about a couple of projects. Let's talk about them real quickly. CALETS building, you have council approved drawings and
Yep.
a plan on Thursday. What's going in there?
So that's going to be a public space, really.
And it'll operate during normal times, and there'll be sometimes you can't do events at night, correct?
Right, and that's that's a part of a larger discussion with a lot of the folks that operate businesses there or that own property there, especially those that have apartments upstairs. So,
And most of those buildings on State Street, with the exception of the bank, do have apartments on the second
yeah,
floors.
yeah. So the landscape down there has changed, no pun intended. But now we have residents that we have to consider their needs and lifestyle as well.
So the big holdup in the past has been an agreement with Mr. Camardo on part of the property. You're transferring a parcel of property to him. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
He's not paying any expenses on that, but he will have to pay taxes on that at a future date.
Correct, and he will be, as will all of the surrounding property owners, the contiguous property owners, are all working in similar fashion, and they will be responsible for the build-out of their particular parcel that is signed over
So
to
Mr.
them.
Driscoll, who owned a real estate, I don't know if he still owns that building, but he...
No, it's been sold to the Mulder Group now.
Okay, and so he's already, that land's been transferred.
Yep.
You have 3 other parcels together that you'll...
Correct.
And those are still going out there. Has Mr. Camargo released the city from any liability? Because that was a question in the past, am I correct?
We're still waiting to complete documentation, but we've had great dialogue all along. He's been, you know, understanding of our needs. We spent a lot of time to understand his needs and everybody else in that area. So,
But if you don't, you're waiting documentation from him, will you still do construction
our plan is we're moving forward with the project.
with or without his consent?
Yes, we're moving forward
Okay.
with the project.
So part of the money is DRI money, downtown revitalization
Yep,
money?
about $1 million.
And then where's the rest of the money coming from?
It's a bond right at the moment. We have engaged a couple of foundations that had expressed some interest in the past, so if we can get some foundation support, we'd certainly welcome that.
The other project that was talked about at the Wednesday morning round table was the fire department on Seminary. Where is that stand right now?
At the
Other than-
corner
yeah.
of Seminary and
In the
Nelson.
corner. I walked right into that.
Yes, sorry. It's progressing well. The masonry work, if you drive by there now, you know, during the winter months it was a little tough to tell. Everything was covered with plastic while they tried to keep the heat in and do masonry work. But the portion of the existing building, now you can see that has 2 new exterior walls on it. The apparatus portion is, the walls are starting to rise up from the earth there. And inside the existing portion of the building that was once a grocery store, they're actually laying out the interior walls, they're doing plumbing, they're doing heating and ventilation work and electrical work in there right now.
And is that all on track from a time?
Yeah, we had a few delays in the very beginning. Several of our projects had some delays along the way, some related to COVID and quarantines of workers and things like that affected everybody. We had a little bit of weather-related stuff, but we're pretty close to being on track for a September opening of that
So
facility.
you hope it'll be operational in September. Does that mean you're closing the Clark Street Firehouse, or does that still stay?
No, that'll stay.
That'll stay. And what else will be housed there? And I know...
So what we are doing is we're moving the operation from Market Street, or the arterial, as most people would probably refer to it as. Those apparatus, that operation will go to the new facility. Contained within that facility as well is an emergency operations center that's purpose-built for that function. Currently, the county and the city don't really have an emergency operations center, which is recommended by Homeland Security to have those things. So we'll have that built out in there for use from the county or the city. And we are moving our IT functions out of City Hall and into that building because it will be a modern building more capable of supporting all of that infrastructure.
So City Council, I want to say last month, or it might have been the month before, but I think it was last month, approved a reval of assessments. That will occur next year, or during this year to take effect next year?
Correct.
What does that entail?
So at that, our assessor and their assistant will actually go out and they will assess, they will put eyes on every property in the city.
So it's being done internally versus bringing in outside consultants?
Correct, and that's the way it's been done for quite some time.
So since 2014, you've tried to get it on a cyclical, so it would have been 2018, and this will be the 3rd round.
Yep.
You're trying to get this on a cycle.
Yep, best practice.
Does that mean that everybody should expect a tax increase next year?
No, that's not the way it works. So really, you know, what we're...
Maybe the perceived way it works, though.
Correct,
So explain what happened.
So, you know, again, the tax rate is based on the total assessed value, and then based on the needs that we have for whatever our projected budget is for any given year. So the higher the assessed value of the total properties in the city, the lower the tax rate actually is as a percentage. But again, if I have you know, using round figures, if I have a $100,000 house that gets revailed at 120,000, yes, it can feel like,
If the tax rate stays flat.
right, right.
And so,
So you'll see fluctuation. You see that over time.
and people can appeal.
Right.
They may not win. They can take you to court.
Right. So we have a Board of Assessment Review that reviews those cases within a particular
And people
amount of
will
time.
most likely be notified next January.
Yes, I'm not sure of the exact time frame, but
They usually send them out on the Friday before Memorial Day, or excuse me, Martin Luther King's birthday, just to drive everybody nuts.
so, but that process is very methodical and meticulous. Again, every single property in the city gets valued, and not from a desk. They literally go out into the field and they will park in front of every home, every business, every parcel in the city, and you know, evaluate it based on past information.
And just so people know, there are about 10,000 properties in the city of Auburn.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, so it becomes a very busy time for the assessor's office, and they look at things like, you know, current sales, which is, you know, that's a hot topic for us right now because home sales seem to be pretty strong.
It's a seller's market.
And values are pretty good, so that will have an impact on things.
I want to talk about two external items that we got questions on. One is that the city owns or operates now the Heritage Center, better known as the Visitor Center, correct?
Yep.
On that. The City Council recently was discussing its operations. I want to say that was about a month and a half ago. You have a contract with the Business Improvement District
Yes.
to operate that. Was that renewed? Is that now in
Yes.
place? How long is
Yep.
that for?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall. It's I think a couple of years at a time.
So the worry was from critics originally was the state was going to give you $10 million, you're going to build it, and then all the operating costs were going to be the city's ad infinitum.
Right.
Is that the case?
No, we gained some revenue from the bid actually pays a lease, and the chamber pays a lease down there. So there is income there. We generate sales tax with the Taste New York market, generates some sales tax. I don't have actual figures on that. We do have a funding stream from New York State that helps support that to the tune of
So
about $50,000.
out of taxpayer funds, how much do Auburn taxpayers pay for?
By the time we get done, I looked quick before we came over, and the budget on that thing is about $160,000, and we get at least $80,000 of that back.
So about 80,000 is roughly, and
Right.
and some
And
of
that's
that is paid by.
building maintenance and contracts for, you know, particular services and things like that.
So moving forward, the New York Penn League is no more as of
Correct.
now.
Correct?
But the city has come up with a deal, you have come up with a deal, with a new vendor to keep the name, the Auburn Doubledays, and some type of baseball at Falcon Park. So what do you
Right.
propose? I shouldn't say proposing because it was approved on Thursday night.
Right.
Or last Thursday. What's going on?
So we spent a lot of time. We knew that baseball was near and dear to lots of folks in Auburn, and we've got a fantastic and lengthy history of baseball in the city. We wanted to make sure we did everything we could to maintain a high level of quality baseball, but we wanted ownership that was going to be engaged in the community and in it for all what we thought were the right reasons. And you know, early on, before things totally fell apart with Major League Baseball and the New York Penn League, we were approached by several leagues, several team owners, prospective team owners,
That wanted to buy the facility.
managers.
They wanted to buy
They
the
saw the
asset.
writing on the wall and they wanted to get their foot in the door early on. So we had some lengthy conversations and relationships with a number of leagues and owners and prospective owners. We went through a process whereby we interviewed all of those folks to find out what they proposed and what their thoughts were, what their vision was, and we ended up with a couple of gentlemen that currently own two different not minor league teams, collegiate teams, and have some history there.
So explain, this is going to be a collegiate versus a minor league team. So minor
Correct.
league people would think, you know, Houston or New York or Boston or
Right.
Washington would have, you know, different
Yeah.
levels, and we were
And
one
we
of the
don't
levels.
really necessarily think that you're going to see much of a difference in the level of skill and the level of play compared to what we had before in the short season single A. And there was a lot of entry-level folks hoping to get that big chance, right? And several of them did.
So you'll still expect scouts are going to come and be looking at these players?
Absolutely. The numbers I've heard is that in the last 10 or 11 years, there's been approximately 400 young players drafted out of this particular league. So there's still going to be some activity. There's still some really
So they own two other teams where?
So
are they Batavia?
Bob Oman, one of the owners of the new franchise, owns a franchise in this same league in Geneva.
Geneva, okay.
And the other gentleman, Don Lewis, owns a franchise in a different league, the New York Collegiate Baseball League in Pennsylvania.
Okay. And so I know Mr. Oman will be here next Tuesday. He'll be here a week from now talking a little bit about this. So they operate the teams for you. Any idea how many games they'll play in a season?
Off the top of my head, at home games, I think we're going to be in the mid-20s. So it'll be slightly fewer than what we used to see.
About half of what we used to see.
Yeah.
And they're still going to be known as the double days.
Right.
And so the city's still going to get, on merchandise, going to get a cut.
Yep. So there was a variety of opinions on that in the community and whether it should have a whole new name or not. But we thought that, you know, seeing there is a local connection to Abner Doubleday, that it would be nice to keep that name and that name recognition.
But from a revenue side, that's a good thing for the city of Auburn.
Right, so we are not going to forfeit or sell or relinquish our rights to any of the trademarks or the name. So we have an agreement in place. We're waiting to finalize that agreement for use of the trademarks and to, again, get some of that revenue.
So are they going to pay you for use of the field?
Yes.
And has that been worked out?
Yes, that was part of the agreement that was agreed to a few weeks ago.
And so how much will you get on the revenue side on that front?
It's not a tremendous amount, but it is based on pretty much the same type of a rate that anybody, if you had a ball team and you wanted to utilize Falcon Park yourself, you'd pay a rate. So based on the number of games.
And you still have the college there.
Absolutely.
And they're paying
we still
your
have the
bonds.
college, we still have the high school, we have now this new team, which instead of us propping it up, they will stand on their own and be a revenue stream. And there's been a tremendous amount of interest in Falcon Park for baseball teams, softball teams, soccer, lacrosse, all across the board. It's the busiest we've ever seen it down there.
No concerts, though, at this particular stage?
No, we're going to stick with some
Sports.
stuff that's relatively
low noise.
Relatively simple, right?
Okay. So how long is this agreement?
Their agreement is 3 years.
And in the past, when you had the double days there as part of whether it was Washington or Toronto or Houston, city crews had to maintain that. Is that still going to be the case?
Yes, we're going to maintain the field. There are, just like there is in the agreement with the college, there are some basic provisions in the agreement that, in the case of the college, that the college has to do certain maintenance items, and in this case, the owner of this team will have to do similar things.
So, as you know, there's COVID still around.
Yep.
So you have required, on behalf of the city, some safety protocols, correct?
Right.
So that means that you will not get a crowd of 2,000 there. Not that you did many years in a row.
Right, right.
But you are looking at reduced capacity, am I correct?
Right at the moment, right? So I believe yesterday there were some new rules that went into effect yesterday that increased the number of attendees that could attend an event like that outside, but it certainly was not a very large number. So we'll continue to watch that. We will make changes as appropriate when we know what the guidance is.
So 3 last questions on this particular front. How important was it, not necessarily for you, but for City Hall in general, to keep some type of baseball operation at Falcon Park?
I don't know about City Hall in general.
Or City Council.
You know, at least from talking to me, that, you know, my baptism into baseball happened while I was in this position, and I grew into having a tremendous appreciation for
the complexity.
Yes, yes. It's not what a lot of folks, I think, imagine, but there is a tremendous amount of history there. I'm a huge history buff. I really hate to lose that history. So it was important, and it was important to try to do the right thing, because I know how much attention there is to this.
So this would have been, doing it this way might not have been as easy, but it would have been better for the city than selling the asset.
The asset really had no value by the time we got done.
Do you think you'll get any money from Major League Baseball?
I don't know. It's tough to tell. We're still exploring that. There's several teams that have legal actions pending.
So we got 5 minutes left. A couple of quick items. Chief of Police was here. Sean Butler's here 3 weeks ago. He is leaving at the end of July, or sometime in July.
Yep.
Have you named a replacement yet?
I have not. We are working through the process to name a replacement, hopefully relatively soon. I was hoping by the end of March, but you know, we've had several things pop up that have slowed that down.
But you are working with the idea that it'll be an internal candidate.
Correct.
It is also because you have a current list, which has not always been the case in the past.
Correct. Yes.
And this will be a decision by you and not the city council?
Yes.
Any thoughts on Chief Butler and his service?
I'm glad Chief Butler was where he was when he was.
Especially in the last year?
In the last year, we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot together, he and his department and us as a city. We've been through a lot. And when I say us, I mean the whole community, not just City Hall, but there's been a whole lot going on. And whether you talk about the actual police reform and Executive Order 203, or just all of the discussions that happened through the summer prior to Executive Order 203.
And that has all been resolved, am I correct? That has been approved by City Council, what you had to report?
Yeah, we've met, I guess I'd say this, we've met the timelines that were put out by New York State, and that's fine, but it's not a done deal. It's
No,
not
but-
as though we seal the,
But you have to, but there are certain benchmarks you had to hit. And
Correct.
you have hit those.
Correct. So we've achieved everything we needed to through, you know, based on that executive order, but there's more work to do. We've established some really, really good relationships with community groups and some community leaders that have really been helpful in other areas like COVID and vaccinations. So we've improved communication, we've expanded everybody's network, and it's helped. I mean, it's our situation with vaccinations, it certainly isn't perfect, but without some of those relationships that really
In
started to
underserved
grow.
communities.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you try to talk the chief out of retiring?
No, I have too much respect for most people to do that, right? So I always figure.
And you've been a long-time city employee yourself.
Yeah,
Fire chief.
and normally when people come to that decision,
they've
they've done a lot of soul searching.
So last 2 minutes of questions is on city budget, just where you are. So where are you in the budget process right now?
Well, we've gone through, all of our department heads submit a preliminary budget to us, and then the comptroller and assistant comptroller and myself go through with each department head, kind of whittle things down to try to get us closer to the mark. We're still going through that process. We are waiting, as we normally do, breathlessly for New York State to determine what they're going to do.
So you've got all this federal money
Yep.
coming in. That might help, but again, one time, if you spend it this year, you got a problem next year.
Right.
Do you know where you are on the aid front when it comes to Albany for what's proposed?
We have the governor's proposed budget, and then we have the
One house
the
bills.
volley back, right?
Right. So on the
here's what we want
governor's
to see.
budget, are you in good shape or are you short of what you had
We
hoped?
would be short based on the governor's original proposed budget, or even the revised budget, based on what
And that's due in 8 days anyway.
Right, based on what our state representatives have proposed, we'll be better off than we have been for the last few years.
So your expectation is you'll release the budget sometime in April.
Correct.
Do you see we'll have an increase in property taxes at this stage?
We will probably propose a budget with a modest property tax increase for the council to discuss.
And are your where are you on your sales tax revenues? Are they
Sales tax has been up and down. It's been actually much better than we had anticipated. If you recall, last budget cycle,
Right.
we didn't know what was going to happen, and council wanted to make sure we were safe, and they had us put in an incremental, basically a reduction in sales tax compared to the prior year. We've outperformed that, so our
So
sales
that'll be a
tax hit.
factor as you get the third
Correct.
quarter numbers?
Yep.
Last question is from, as I said, you and I talked about this on the way in. I have an 8-year-old contacted me about your budget because he's only got one thing on his mind if it isn't baseball, and that's about music and movies at Hoops Park.
Yep.
Last year, City Council rightfully had to cancel that because of social distancing and whatnot. You said vaccines are going much better. We've been seeing the reports about Central New York. Do you see that you might put that back in the budget, even though you might not approve it until July, to bring back movies? And it's not only Hoops Park, but it's also downtown.
Right, right. So definitely a lot of interest in that from the community, from staff, from artists. We're not quite sure where we're going to fall with that right at the moment. We're leaning away from like the Memorial Day parade. It's too much too soon. We can't control that gathering, you know, as far as, you know, there's no way for us to logically control proximity of people and compliance with the regulations. Some of the smaller events, like you say, maybe music or a movie, things like that, we may be able to get some of those
And
things
you may
off
have
the ground.
mask requirements and things of that
Right,
nature.
right. So we always have to be careful. We want to make sure we're setting the example, at least, you know, to comply with whatever the current state mandates are. So
Well, I know that Samuel will be very happy that you answered their question. So
it's a question on a lot of people's minds. So
I
he's not
figured.
alone.
So we do want to thank City Manager Jeff DYGERT for joining us today. Hopefully we'll have you back in the fall. By that time, you'll have a fire department up and running on Seminary, and you are close to being up and running. You'll have the pocket park done on Callet, and you'll know how you've spent some of your federal money.
Yes, we have a lot of projects going on that should wrap up by the fall. So.
Oh. Well, thank you for being with us today, and good luck with your State of the City speech tomorrow on Wednesday
Thanks.
with the county. Excuse me, with the Chamber of Commerce. On Thursday, we'll be back with Cayuga-Seneca Community Action Agency's Director of Family Services, Frank Barr-Winzak. He'll be discussing with us the local spike in domestic violence incidents. Next Tuesday, we'll be back in the studio with a rare back-to-back Beyond the Front Page. As I mentioned, Bob Oman, who is with the group bringing the Auburn Double Days back to Falcon Park this summer, will be here. And then we'll be doing a shorter Beyond the Front Page with David Pappert of the Healing Fields event at Hoops Park, which will be in Memorial Day weekend, and that is to help fund Operation Gratitude. On Thursday the 1st, we'll have New York State Assemblyman John Lamondes for an Albany update. He's a freshman who just went to Albany. And then in 2 weeks from today, we'll have Auburn Superintendent of Schools, Jeff Perazzola, to give us a budget update and where their budget is after the budget hopefully passes on in Albany on April 1st. And then on April 27th, it is our plan to bring you a Zoom forum, the first we've ever done here, with the candidates for the Auburn Large School District. I'll be moderating, and Citizen Executive Editor Jeremy Boyer will be asking the questions as usual. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can send us your thoughts for guests or questions to Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page at 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, or you can do it at cozguytho@aol.com. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night, have a great tomorrow, and we will see you back here in the studio on Thursday. And in between and beyond that, be safe.